Hello, Squadaland back with another progress report on Squadaland, which is what I've decided I'm just going to stick with that name. My sort of ode to the American amusement park here, my first park in Planet Coaster 2. Briefly, I was considering renaming it to Squaddle Lake, but I realized the lake that I was going to add wasn't really going to be a huge part of this park, so it didn't really matter. Big update here for the park, but before we get to the real fun stuff, I just thought I'd start with some of the minor stuff. The last episode back here in the memory lane 50s area, I hadn't built this building yet, just a simple shop, Curly's corner store here. Why Curly's? I don't know. It just sounded right. Yeah, just a simple little corner store thing to just round out this 50s area. I also renamed the Twist and Shout to the Twist and Shout because there were too many things with in abbreviations back here. But yeah, just a simple building around this out. Not crazy about this part of the facade here. It's pretty bad, but honestly, I don't want to spend a ton of time on it because this isn't really a theme park at the end of the day. It's sort of an amusement park, although my new area, which we can get a little teaser of back there, breaks that in a couple of ways, but we'll see. Just moving our way out of here, work our way back there. A couple other things changed. This is now the Jamming Roadsters for reasons we'll explain. Make more sense when we get to the new area. It's because I used the word raging somewhere else, and I realized there were two raging attractions. But yeah, Jamming Roadsters here. The Galaxy Theater received a little bit of an updated facade because I added some pieces to make it sort of a little more 3D, a little less flat. I think just that little change there makes it look quite a bit better than it did before. I also moved the queue line and everything for Hot Rod over. Redid basically the entire thing, honestly. Although, obviously, there's still theming that needs to be done here once we get custom supports in the December update. But yeah, let's actually travel over and take a look at some of the more interesting updates here. Still haven't done anything with the Skyride Station. It's still just an empty shell. That'll probably be part of the next update because I'll actually finish the destination area where I'll go back and finish this. Still empty space next to the carousel here, which will probably be a store or just purely queue line for the Skyride. Do have one new building in this area. We have a very simple sort of pizzeria thing, Donatello's. Probably not an opening day thing. Maybe would have been renovated at some point in the 2000s. So it doesn't really fit the vibe of the area, but that's kind of the point. It was just figured there needed to be one more building in this area to just sort of round it out. But enough about that. We're going to move into the new area here. But before we get to the new area, we have this ivy walkway here. Very, very much inspired by both, particularly Carowinds has one of these, but also, off the top of my head, Six Flags St. Louis did. I don't know if there's an actual name for these. They're basically just almost like a topiary, except instead of like an actual figure, it's an archway. But yeah, I actually have this up on the workshop if you want something like this. But it creates sort of a natural barrier into our not new in the canon of the park, because I don't know if I made that clear in my first episode that like I'm not building this in the order that the park would have built it. I'm just technically when the park is finished, that will have been its modern state. I'm kind of just building in the order that I want to. But yeah, we are in a sort of frontiersy area, but also kind of more, I would say, like California, like woodsy arts and crafts style. Not really like Wild West. So yeah, this is, I guess I'm calling it kind of Sierra Trail in my head. I don't really know what else I would call it. Name isn't really that important, but we got 4 new attractions back here since the last update. Obviously, kind of hard to miss since it dropped as we came in. The first big one is kind of our generic 90s 2000s addition to the area. Really doesn't fit. Fearfall. It may not fit, but I honestly really like the sign that I made for it. It's very simple, just letters on sticks, but when we see it at night, it'll look really good. I just realized I forgot to turn off the UI. There we go. I don't really care about what's going on in the park right now. But yeah, just a pretty generic drop tower ride. One thing I forgot to mention in the last episode I'm kind of paying attention to, and this is very much inspired by my recent trip to Tokyo Disneyland, of all places, is actually my choice of paths through the park. I'm trying to keep it where you can kind of tell where older areas that haven't been redone are basically just asphalt, and then newer areas kind of have more of a decorative sort of like footing that you'd find in more modern parks. Carowinds also had a little bit of this, where it's like you could really tell which areas of the park have been redone and which haven't by whether or not they've bothered to remake the paths from just pure asphalt. The drop on Fearfall there. But otherwise, we had the Wilderness Inn restaurant here. Just a simple sort of log cabin-ish thing. I didn't want to go too crazy with the theme, because again, this isn't really a theme park, and this would have been one of the older buildings in this area. I don't really think it gets that point across, but I don't know. I realized later on that I probably should have used Viking wood for some of the older buildings, which I did for one of the other ones we'll see. But either way, kind of just a simple eating establishment. So I'll talk about this in a sec. We had the entrance to Fearfall. Just, again, I tried to be relatively simple here. Well, I need to raise that a little bit. Everyone's almost banging their head on this sign. Yeah, just very simple covers. Kind of a switchback queue. Not much going on. Isn't really supposed to look that involved. I used a bunch of these jetty pieces as a quick and dirty sort of wooden wall to block access into the mine train area. But yeah, not much to say because it's a flat ride. Raging Rapids. So I will say that it's been about a week, but it's also been like 40 hours of progress for just this area. I'd say most of that time was probably eaten up by two attractions, and this is one of them. Raging Rapids. First of all, I actually started this sign as a sign for Fearfall. And I ended up liking it too much to waste on the sort of like weird 90s edition. And so I kind of refit it into a rapid sign with the splashing water thing, and I think it's even better as that. So I quite like this sign. Go ahead and just step into the queue. You can kind of see what took me so long now, where I'll exit the foot view here in a sec to go over it, but I didn't want... I wish... So, technically, a normal amusement park wouldn't have this elaborate of, like, covering on the outside. The general trough of a river rapids would be, like, concrete. But in this game, it's, like, metal and plastic, and there's no way to really have the terrain get flush with that without cutting into the ride. So, I ended up covering the entire perimeter of the river rapids in a Viking fence piece turned on its side. And so that was several hours of work. But yeah, we'll just head back here. Very simple queue structure. Again, this is kind of one of... If this wasn't an opening day attraction, it would have been one of the first new additions to the park after opening day in like the 70s. Oh yeah, for some reason there's an invisible wall here where I can't walk, but the guests can. Let me see if I can jump over it. Oops. I cannot jump over it. Alright, might as well exit the guest view and actually go over there while I talk about this. So it's a relatively simple river rapids ride. It doesn't have any drops or big lifts like a lot of modern river rapids that are being built. Very much an old school, just a bunch of rapids and a river. There is this one waterfall feature here in the back. But other than that, it's just simple floating along the river. There's a lift hill because the river's technically sloped down a little bit, but there isn't really a drop or anything. But yeah, I mean, it just took forever because if we click on the river channel, it's just a ton of these fence pieces all along the entire edge of the river, and then some additional rock pieces around that. One thing actually that was fun about this though was, and it's something I kind of wanted to talk about in the last episode and I forgot. One reason I actually did take a while is I was actually playing this because I have a handheld PC. I have an Asus ROG Ally X. And Planet Coaster 2 actually runs pretty well on it. But I also stream the game from my PC down here too. I could do either one. If the stream isn't working well, then I just switch to playing it locally. And so, actually, the controller support, it's definitely a game you'd prefer to use a keyboard and mouse, but the controller support isn't too bad because they made it for console at the same time. And I actually used that to do a vast majority of this rock fence because it's just simple move, rotate, place. And that's the kind of thing that the controller is pretty well suited for. So it wasn't like the most stressful thing. This would have been murder if I were just sitting at my computer doing this whole thing. So the fact that I could like lay back on the couch and place these fences like really softened the blow. And then over here, the station, a little bit more complex. Probably, well, I guess they would have built something like this in the era. Just simple, though, wooden cover structure for the station. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the river rapids. Deliberately not looking up right now, even though you can see that there's something to look at, because we need to resume our on-foot expedition into the area. We do see a sign that says the ride exit is to the right, because I guess in my head I realized that the ride exit's kind of really far away from the right entrance for this ride. So anybody who didn't want to ride and wanted to wait off-ride, it's kind of a weird spot for them to wait because they don't exit. They exit pretty far away, so I just put a sign saying go this way. This covered bridge is actually the last thing I built in here, and I'm just now noticing there's a giant gap where that wood needs to touch, so I'll need to fix that. But I just didn't like the way the default wood bridge looked here, so I put a covered walkway, and I think it looks pretty nice. Over on the right, we get our first, well, actually there was a decent view at the entrance, but a good view of the Big Rock Mine Train roller coaster. Although, it'll be a bit before we talk about that, because it's actually currently the furthest tucked back thing in the land. But we get to another big later addition in this area, and definitely my favorite part of the area. Condor, the big, I don't know actually how you pronounce it. I meant to look it up before I went. I always said Bulliger and Mabillard, because I think that's what they said on America's Greatest Roller Coaster Thrills, a VHS tape I had when I was a kid. But I've heard Bulliger, I've heard Mabillard, I've heard any thing, but B&M is the short term for the manufacturer of these. But yeah, we have the big B&M Invert there, their Condor. We have an exit shop for it. Again, going much more with the arts and crafts sort of, like, I was really looking at pictures of Wilderness Lodge and at Walt Disney World and the Grand Californian at Disneyland is sort of my inspiration for these. But yeah, the Roost is sort of the exit shop. Exit shops wouldn't normally have their doors closed and you have to physically open them during the day, but I also didn't want to make the interiors of shops, because that sounds like a level of detail that would pretty much make me swear off this game forever if I had to spend hours doing that. So I just threw a door on it, because if we go in, it's just this. But yeah. So yeah, we have the Roost, which is your exit shop. But coming up here, definitely really, really, really happy with how this thing came out. Condor. In my headcanon, this would probably also have been a late 90s, 2000s thing, but it also fits in with the land too much. So I kind of broke my own headcanon with that. But I also just liked the way this ride turned out too much to just give it a simple cover and be done. So I kind of just went a little bit further than I should have, maybe, to stick with the headcanon. So I actually started this ride, and I probably built it in like 30 minutes using pre-built element pieces. And the pre-built element pieces that Frontier made kind of suck. They aren't realistic. And literally the most intense portion of the ride was just a valley between two inversions that I couldn't smooth because they don't let you smooth the transitions between like their pre-made elements. Hold on, this is about to do a corkscrew over her head. So I ended up just saying fuck it and went and watched some tutorials on like making elements and like ended up spending 4 or 5 hours hand making the entire layout, smoothing it, heartlining it, trying to make it as smooth as possible. But anyways, here's the original design of Condor using the pre-made inversions and stuff. Like, this is the pre-made Batwing element. It doesn't really look right. It looks really just, like, squished and weird. And actually, my final... this 0G roll doesn't look anything like it would on an invert coaster. The vertical loop probably is better than my vertical loop, to be honest, because mine's a little too round at the top, but really my deal breaker was the fact that right here on the ride was actually the most intense part of the ride at like 5 Gs, which is like completely wrong. But because this is an element and this is an element, you can't really, like, you cannot smooth them. Like, I've selected both elements, smoothing completely grayed out. So there's literally nothing I could do about it. And so I'm just like, you know what? And I've always wanted to kind of make a really, like, realistic coaster in this game. So I'm just going to keep the lift hill, and I'm going to, like, rebuild the layout myself and try and keep the forces in check. So actually... Now, again, this is actually, technically, the in-game one, because the game rewards unrealistic forces, which... It's irritating for me, but it's also, like, if you're making a video game, it's probably fine, because, like, then you don't have to be super, like, anal about making sure it's perfect. But it technically, as far as the game is concerned, is more exciting. But yeah, can I don't know if I can actually have both. No, I can't have both these open at the same time. But yeah, it pulls 5 Gs, 1.61 lateral Gs, which definitely feels like too much for a B&M Invert. Anything else? Is this one, which one's longer actually? I don't know. This one is slightly longer. The newer one is slightly longer. It's a slightly bigger drop and bigger max speed, which I didn't intend, but much lower lateral forces, which I feel like are more in check. Vertical Gs are more in check, I think, and they are at the right part of the ride. But yeah, very, very pleased with this ride. Yeah. B&M Invert coaster, very similar to many of their classic 90s ones, so it's got very intense elements. Afterburn at Carowinds is definitely probably the most inspiration for this, but I did add my own spin to it, because really these rides are always just a collection of inversions in a row, so there's really only so original they can be. But to me it was more about making it as smooth as possible. So we got like a 95-foot drop into a big vertical loop. The loop's a little too rounded at the top, but I'm not that concerned. Then we have a high-speed, high-G turn, which is a little unusual. Usually there's another inversion. And then we have a 0G into my favorite element, the Batwing, which is the most intense portion of the ride. Generally, any B&M Invert that has a Batwing, it's the most intense part of the ride and the best part of the ride. Quick helix there, also pulls up to like 3 Gs through there into one, I think they call them wing overs, but I mean it's a corkscrew. And then a second helix, and the ride hits the brakes with basically the same speed that it exits the brakes, which means it pretty much has the exact amount of energy it needs to get to the brake run. So yeah, that's the ride. I'm going to go ahead and exit this view. We can get a better overview of it. But yeah, really happy with how this turned out. I think it's really smooth. It's actually, let me just pull up some statistics on it. This game really doesn't reward positive Gs well, so it's only at a 4.7 in excitement. It tends to really favor negative Gs, which, to be fair, negative Gs tend to be more fun on a ride, and what I prefer as well. But positive G's are fun too, and I think that rating is criminally low for like a good B&M invert, but whatever. But yeah, 56 mile an hour, 96 foot drop. Only pulls 0.67 lateral G's, which I'm very proud of, because like I don't know how many lateral G's a normal B&M coaster pulls, but it's not many. And it really shows that I think for manually having made the entire layout, I think I heartlined it pretty damn well. And I think that's really only during the 0G roll, and I think it's because it takes it a little slow, so you get slammed to the side there. 4.3 vertical Gs, pulls it right about there, which is exactly where I wanted the most intense part of the ride to be. The pull out of this massive bat wing here. The layout for this is on the workshop, by the way. I didn't include any scenery, because at some point I'm going to need to add some custom supports here, because the game didn't generate any. These supports on the loop are very unrealistic and stupid looking, so I also need to replace those. And then I think there's like a couple other spots where it's kind of missing some supports that it needs. But yeah, overall, this is probably the best roller coaster I've ever made in any Planet Coaster game. It's definitely the one I spent the most time in the layout on, just to give it that extra little bit of realism. I figure if I'm trying to give realism to the Aero coaster, and those I don't even like that much, I should give even more attention to a ride that I would genuinely enjoy riding, and this is something I would genuinely enjoy riding. But yeah, really pleased with this ride. The dives down into the tunnel. Big fan of that. Let's switch back to the guest view. Get rid of the UI. We'll keep walking here. There's a toilet. Directly across from it is a toilet, and some vending machines. And that's not much else I say about that. Oh, I brought up the path thing earlier because one of the fun things, actually this is more visible from above, to sort of make the canon of the park a little more canon, I actually made a path that went directly where this Batwing would have gone as sort of the original path of the park, and then when they put in this coaster, they had to they said to just sort of go whoop and just make the path go around it. And so I very deliberately kind of sold that idea by tearing out the path that I literally just built just to tear it out so that I could have it flow the way I wanted it to. But yeah. So let's go ahead and switch back. Move on to the final edition of this area. Not what I'm particularly proud of because, and I don't think it's entirely my fault, we'll put it that way. We have the big rock mine train, which is just an old Aero mine train, would have been an opening day roller coaster for the park. Just go ahead and go back here. It's the most popular ride in the park because in terms of how the guests in game, this is the newest ride in the park, but reality would be one of the older ones. I just missed the train. There we go. Oop, hold on. Let me just get all situated here. Front bumper. Turn off the UI. So this is inspired actually by Cedar Creek Mine Ride at Cedar Point. You actually go through the ride's maintenance shed at the beginning of that ride, which is a little weird, but I just figured I'd include that. I didn't really do that much with it. I kind of just threw some boxes in there to pretend that it was maintenance stuff. But the reason I'm not happy with this ride is these rides generally aren't very exciting. They're very family rides. Not much happens. They have way too many lift hills for how much they do. But this one is even more boring than that, and I feel like part of that problem is the friction values feel very high in Planet Coaster 2 for this ride, where it just runs out of steam so fast. Like, it just could barely do anything more, and I really needed this second lift right here. And then the ride had barely done anything, and it wasn't even like, this is actually one of the taller mine trains if it were real. So there's zero reason why it should have ran out of momentum that quickly, I feel like. So I just have a second lift into a simple drop into a helix into the final brake run. These rides don't do too much, but they would generally do a lot more than that. Like, and also I'm unhappy, and this is something that I couldn't really do anything about unless I wanted to spend hours on this. First of all, these rides normally have wooden supports. They're still steel roller coasters because the rails are steel, but they usually have wooden supports. The only one that I can think of that's an aero mine train that has steel supports is Runaway Mine Train at Six Flags Great Adventure. So I wish this had wooden supports. It's because technically in-game these are considered Vekoma mine trains, and they're based on Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. Probably particularly the Paris version, which is definitely a Vekoma roller coaster. So, like, I'm trying to use it for something it's not, but I don't know. I just wish that wooden supports were an option, and I'm not going to manually make them. But speaking of Runaway Mine Train at Six Flags Great Adventure, I actually made this about the same height as that ride. And that ride, you could tell just by watching a video, it's able to do so much more than I was able to with this layout. Just because, like this drop off of this lift is not insignificant, and it still, like, has zero momentum going into this helix. And I just kind of reached a point where I just kept redesigning this to try and give it a little bit more punch, but I finally just gave up. Because I just wanted a mine train for the aesthetics of the area, really. And it was never going to be the most fun roller coaster, but I also feel like it's not the most realistic of these layouts. And it's just kind of boring. But whatever. It's there to just fill this area of the park, and I feel like any park of this size should still have one of these mine train coasters. But yeah, that is pretty much it for everything I've added. But I do, before I get out of this file, want to switch it to nighttime. Not a ton of lighting things. The Big Rock for Big Rock Mine Train is lit up. Condor has orange lights on it, but the spotlights aren't super powerful, so it's not overly noticeable. But it's definitely got a little bit of lighting on it. It's much more noticeable over here. The river rapids is not moving. What the hell's going on over here? It's weird. I don't know why that's backed up. Really, I just wanted to show this sign. Like, this is supposed to be my, like, stupid 90s edition that didn't really make sense to this area, but the way the lighting, like, weirdly makes this sign two-tone, I think looks, like, awesome as hell. Much more awesome than it does in the day. So it was, like, a very simple sign, but I also kind of love it. But yeah, so that's pretty much it for additions for the park. If you made it this far, thank you very much for watching. Obviously, I know this isn't the most exciting content people are really tuning in for, but I know at least a few people who have tuned in, so I figured I would continue making the series. This is where I get the 900 notifications that my staff have no breaks that I have to mute. That's a new one. Why are many guests hungry? I have, like, restaurants everywhere. Anyways, future plans. Next up, I have to make the back of this area. Technically, this area isn't done because I have to make a train station for it. But I'm not 100% sure that's where the train station's going to be, so I just left it. But, and also, as I said, I need to make, like, 3 or 4 custom supports for this ride. But not until an update comes out. Next up, I'm probably going to be working on this area back here, which is going to be like my county fair midway area. Big lake over here, and then we'll kind of see where it goes from there. Eventually, I have to make a water park out here. I'll be honest, it's probably been over 20 years since I've been to a water park. I am not a big water park person. It's not that I hate them, it's just that I don't care. So I want to build a water park because water parks are new to this game. It's probably not going to have the same level of polish that I would put into the amusement theme park area. And it's probably not going to be as realistic, because here I could be like, the manufacturer, this is a Vekoma, so it's like a Vekoma roller skater roller coaster. I don't know shit. Water slides, so it's gotta be, this is the twirly one. It does a loop. So the commentary's not gonna be great for that episode when that gets built, but whatever. Not that any of this commentary's been great, but at least I feel like I'm a little more knowledgeable in what the hell I'm talking about over here, as opposed to the water slide, which I'll probably do a little bit of research, but yeah, it's just not something I'm super into. But thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time, whenever that is. Oh, actually, I may also, at some point, float between this project and another project. Because there is one thing I'm missing about this, is I really want to make a dark ride, but a dark ride, a well-themed dark ride does not fit this park at all. So I'm not going to make it in this park. So I might do it as like a one-off thing in its own little project and throw the blueprint on the workshop. Or I may start my actual theme park that I want to make and then like bounce between the two. When I want to just mindlessly make roller coasters, I do it over here. Not mindlessly, but you know what I mean. When I don't want to have to worry about super theming them, I may bounce to this park. When I feel like I want to make a really themed attraction, I may bounce to another park. But we'll see. Either way, thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time. Goodbye. Okay, little bonus material here at the end. I decided to look in because I kept getting notifications. Why the hell is everyone so hungry in this damn park? But once again, the game clearly not being finished rears its ugly head. If we go into the Dine and Dash, this dipshit, who is supposed to be working the restaurant, is waiting in line at his own restaurant, waiting for himself to return. And I can't move him, and I've tried closing and reopening it, and that doesn't work. So I'm going to fire this guy on camera, and hopefully this fixes the issue. Oh, I fired him, so he got into the thing, and now he's... I think he's striking. Leave! I just want you to leave! Somebody else replace you! Oh god. Again, I've literally made everything about the management of this aspect. I've turned it off, and it's still finding ways to break. So, again, unless you're like me and you really, really, really want to get creative with this, I would definitely not recommend picking this game up at this moment. Because I'm enjoying my time with it, but I feel like if you're not already, like, super into making a detailed theme park, don't get this game. It's... definitely wait on this game. It's a mess. Anyways, now I'm actually going to say thank you very much for watching. And I guess I'm going to try and get control of my hot dog stand back from this guy. Thanks. Bye.